back, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about forge making and design. So, first thing you gotta worry about, first thing to really think about when you're doing this is your materials. What are you going to make your forge out of? Well, we can eliminate a few possibilities. First off, you don't want to make it out of wood. That would be a really bad idea. Wood burns. If you're making an outdoor temporary forge, maybe you could get away with it. You probably want to put it in a pit, but even then, I mean, it'd just be really bad. So you're going to want to make something out of some sort of refractory material, something that won't burn. So metal, you want to make it out of, say, aluminum or something like that? Probably not. You don't want a metal that melts. So you're probably going to want to cross things like aluminum, copper, bronze, even steel, probably, in many cases, off your list. Now, you do see some forges with steel exteriors, and you're probably saying, hey, what about those? Well, this is where refractory materials come into play. So you have things like fire bricks, high heat mortar, ceramic fiber, and high heat cement. So these are four things that really work out great for containing a lot of heat in an area and being resistant to it over a long period of time. It's also really good at reflecting the heat. So you want something that can take the heat, but you also want something that can reflect the heat and keep it in there. So what you're gonna want, optimally, is fire bricks. That's my go-to, but that's because of the shortfalls of everything else. So, first off, ceramic wool. It's actually a really great insulator, and it's really great at keeping the heat in. The problem with it is that it is a natural carcinogen. Ceramic wool is asbestos, so you're gonna want to avoid that as best as you can. Well, high heat cement is good. It's, I'd say, less good than the ceramic wool, but it gets the job done and it's not a carcinogen. So what's my problem with it? My problem with it is that it tends to crack too much. After a long period of time, it starts falling out, and yeah, it becomes a real mess after a while. So you're gonna want to probably avoid that just for the longevity of your forge. Now, I'm not saying, don't do it. No, it's a very valid way of building your forge, and if you're gonna use ceramic wool, I would definitely suggest coating that ceramic wool in that cement. Nothing bad about a hybrid forge, just saying. Now, as far as the fire bricks are concerned, there are still some drawbacks to fire bricks even. Fire bricks are also susceptible to cracking, to brittleness, and just to, over time, just degradation. I don't know. But the degradation of those fire bricks is pretty much the same as a high heat cement, just over a slower period of time. My Jester forge seems to have broken down a little bit, but I've still been able to use it because the fire bricks are still somewhat cohesive, but it is working on limited time, and that is the drawback about working with high heat. High heat tends to break things down. Even some of the most tough, resistant things, metals, if you expose them to heat long enough, will start to just oxidize and oxidize and oxidize, and it just runs away after a while. Even things like tungsten and rhenium and rhodium and all those things that you generally associate with being, high heat resistant, just after a while it just kind of loses it. So you're gonna want to take that into account and just pretty much realize that no matter what you do, your forge is gonna break down over time. Now, with the inevitability of breakdown out of the way, we'll get on to some of the other stuff. So now that we have our preferably fire brick and high heat mortar, which, by the way, if you're going to use fire bricks, use high heat mortar, something that can take the heat. And same with the cement. You want to make sure it's something that can take fire, because not all cement can. If you just get your regular Portland cement at the store, probably not going to go too well, mainly because of all the water in there. It's susceptible to busting a lot. Otherwise, I'd use it. It's much cheaper than the fire bricks. And it's another thing, fire bricks specifically. You don't want to get your regular clay bricks because those will break apart much faster, and sometimes they're liable to exploding. So don't go cheap, go effective. These orange bricks work amazingly, so I would suggest going for that. Anyway, the shape. So you want to take into account a few things when you're determining the shape of your forge. So you want to take into account the size of your projects. You know, what are you going to be making? Is it going to be like axe heads? Is it going to be swords? Is it going to be knives? Is it going to be rings? I mean, if it's going to be really small projects, you don't need a huge forge for it. At that point, you're just wasting space, efficiency, and all that stuff. But if you're going to be working on something like, you know, sledgehammer heads, you're going to want something fairly beefy. Heat source. You want to take into account what you're going to use as your heat source. So if you got a nice gas pipe going in, it's about this big around, you can get away with a big forge. But if you're using something like this, well, let's just say the internal space of your forge is gonna need some help. It should probably be reduced greatly. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems of inefficiency and stuff like that, as I've encountered with the Jester Forge. I made it just slightly too big for a canister like that, or a torch like that, rather, and it just kind of, the heat goes nowhere and it just sort of dissipates. Another thing is, you gotta know the thickness of the walls of the forge. You gotta realize that you can't just get away with a tiny thin little coating of ceramic wool. You need something a little bit beefier. You can't just get a little slice of fire brick. You need to get something that's able to block the heat from getting out, and also to reflect the heat back in. So you want to, I usually go for, you know, probably at least 1 inch, 1.5 inch thickness, maybe even 2 inches if you can help it. So you're going to want to keep in mind your oxygen source. So with that, you're going to want to get good ventilation. Keep in mind that though you don't want too many holes in your forge, you do want some air intake and some sort of output, because otherwise all your fuel is going to get consumed within the forge and your fire is going to go out, essentially. Or all your fuel won't get burned efficiently and you're going to start smelling propane if you're working with a gas forge. You're also going to want to keep in mind the nature of your projects. What are you going to be working with? Are you going to be working with stuff that's going to be long and thin? You're going to be working with something that's pretty evenly proportioned? If so, you're going to want to customize your forge to that. For instance, with mine, the Jester Forge, I try to make it, you know, fairly small to conserve space, but also I want to make it a good pass-through forge so I can forge anything of any length, as well as keeping it somewhat big so that I can change it up every now and again and maybe restore an axe head or two. So keep that in mind, definitely. Another thing you're going to want to take a look at when you're making your forge, and another thing that you should have probably looked at before all of this, is what kind of forge you're going to make. Maybe a gas forge, or is it going to be a coal forge? Now, I obviously have a preference, and that is the gas forge, because it is better in every single way. And by that I mean that it's cheaper, it's cleaner, and it's safer. Generally speaking, you're going to want to get something consistent, safe, clean, cheap. You're going to want to go with gas, preferably, if you can. So definitely do keep that stuff in mind when you're building your forge or just looking into a forge. So with that, thank you guys for joining me for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please do leave a like, a comment, go ahead and subscribe too, because I'm trying to put out videos every day. Have been at least for the last few weeks, so hopefully that continues. Anyway, with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.